You wake up and the first thing you feel is not rest, but a kind of quiet dread. You reach for your phone and within seconds you are confronted with proof. Proof that someone your age just bought a house. Proof that someone from your high school class is holding their newborn. Proof that a former colleague just got a promotion you didn't even know was possible. You scroll, and with each image, a familiar sensation settles in your chest. It's not just envy, it's something closer to a verdict, a feeling that at this exact moment, you are supposed to be somewhere else. You are supposed to be someone else, and because you are not, you are behind. This feeling doesn't stay on the screen. It follows you into the shower, where you mentally calculate how old you will be when you finally have what they have. It sits with you at breakfast, turning your food into a tasteless obligation. It whispers to you as you start your work, reminding you that your current effort is probably not enough to close the gap. You try to push forward, but there's a fog in your brain, a low-grade anxiety that colors everything. You are doing things, but you are not present, because a part of you is always running a race that has no finish line, against opponents who don't even know you exist. This feeling shapes your decisions in ways you don't even notice. You might stay in a job you don't like because it looks stable on paper, and stability is what someone your age is supposed to have. You might end a perfectly good relationship because it doesn't look like the ones you see online, and you fear you are settling for less than what is expected. You might spend money you don't have to create a life that looks acceptable to an audience that isn't paying attention. And when you are alone, the self-talk begins. You tell yourself you are lazy. You tell yourself you lack ambition. You tell yourself that if you had just made better choices 5 years ago, you wouldn't be here now. You treat your own life as a failure of timing. But here is the psychological truth that changes everything. The brain does not have a clock. It has a map. The feeling of being behind is not a measurement of time. It is a measurement of comparison. And comparison is not a natural instinct for tracking progress. It is a social survival mechanism. Your brain is not trying to make you happy. It is trying to keep you safe within the tribe. Thousands of years ago, if you were out of sync with the group, if you were doing something different when everyone else was doing something similar, you were at risk of being excluded. And exclusion in that environment meant death. So your brain developed a hyper-vigilant system to constantly scan for where you stand in relation to others. It is not checking to see if you are happy, it is checking to see if you are safe. When you see someone else hitting a milestone, your brain doesn't process it as information. It processes it as a threat. It says they are moving and you are still. The tribe is leaving. You are going to be left behind in the wilderness. And that triggers a stress response. That fog, that dread, that urge to do something, anything to catch up, that is not a sign that you are failing. That is your ancient survival brain mistaking a social media feed for a matter of life and death. This is why the feeling is so sticky. It's not a logical thought you can just dismiss. It is a physiological event. When you feel behind, your brain releases cortisol. Cortisol narrows your focus. It makes you look for threats. It makes you blind to opportunity and blind to the reality of your own life. You are literally unable to see what you have because your brain has decided that the most important task right now is to figure out how to get what they have. You are trying to solve a survival problem with a timeline that doesn't exist. So, let's look at that timeline, the one you are measuring yourself against. Where did it come from? You might think it's a standard, a cultural norm, but if you trace it back, you will find it is not a standard at all. It is a collage, a patchwork of images and announcements and highlight reels from thousands of different people stitched together into a single fictional life. You have taken the career peak from one person, the relationship milestone from another, the financial status from a third, and the physical appearance from a fourth, and you have created a composite human being that you believe you should be by now. And then you are shocked that you don't measure up to a person who does not exist. This is not a failure of effort. This is a failure of perception. You are running a race against a ghost. The mechanism in your brain that enables this is called the availability heuristic. It is a mental shortcut where you judge the likelihood of something based on how easily you can recall an example. Social media makes the success of others incredibly available. It is right there in your hand, vivid and specific every single day. Meanwhile, your own progress is slow and abstract. It is hard to see the small steps you took today. It is hard to feel proud of the healing you did in private, because those moments are not available to your memory in the same way. They don't have a timestamp and a photo, so your brain concludes that others are advancing rapidly and you are standing still. The data is skewed. You are comparing your behind-the-scenes footage to their greatest hits, and your brain is treating it as a fair comparison. To break this, you have to understand that your brain's map is not wrong, it is just outdated. It is using a social survival system for a world where social survival means something completely different. You cannot turn the system off, but you can recalibrate what it uses as a reference point. You can change what safe means to your brain. The first step is to recognize that your brain is a pattern-matching machine, and you have been feeding it the wrong pattern. Every time you scroll and feel that pang of being behind, you are strengthening a neural pathway. You are teaching your brain that this is the information it should prioritize. You are training yourself to see your life through the lens of lack. The way out is not to pretend you don't care about milestones. The way out is to starve the pathway. You do this by creating friction. You make the trigger harder to access. You put your phone in another room. You log out of the apps. You set specific times to check, and you stick to them. This is not about willpower. It is about architecture. You are designing your environment so the comparison data is not the most available data. When you remove the constant feed of what they did, your brain is forced to look at what is actually in front of you. And what is in front of you is your actual life. The second step is to anchor yourself in a different kind of time. The brain does not process all time equally. It processes time based on emotional intensity and meaning. When you are scrolling, you are in what psychologists call transcendent time. You are floating outside your own life, watching a stream of others. This creates a feeling that time is passing you by. But when you engage in a challenging, focused task, you enter what is called flow. In flow, time slows down or disappears entirely. You are not behind. You are not ahead. You are just here. The cure for the feeling of being behind is not to speed up. It is to deepen your presence in your own moments. When you write that paragraph, when you have that conversation, when you cook that meal, you are not losing time. You are inhabiting it. And an inhabited moment cannot be measured against a ghost's timeline. It simply is. The third step is to understand the psychology of the unfinished self. You have a mental image of who you should be. Psychologists call this the ideal self, and it is healthy to have one. It gives you direction. But when your ideal self is based on a composite of other people's realities, it becomes a tyrant. It is an unattainable standard, and your brain knows it. So instead of motivating you, it shuts you down. This is the core of learned helplessness. When the gap between where you are and where you should be feels too wide, your brain stops trying. It conserves energy. It tells you there is no point. So you have to shrink the gap. You have to make the ideal self your own. You do this by defining one value-based goal for the current season of your life. Not for the next 5 years, for the next 3 months. What is one thing that would make this season feel meaningful to you regardless of what anyone else is doing? When you define that, you give your brain a map it can actually follow. You give it a finish line that is visible, and every small step toward that finish line is registered as progress. Your brain releases dopamine not when you achieve the goal, but when you make progress toward it. You have to give it progress to work with. The fourth step is to reframe the concept of debt.
You feel you are in a debt of time. You owe the universe a certain number of achievements by a certain age. But developmental psychology tells us that human growth is not linear. It is saltatory. That means we grow in spurts and leaps. There are periods of stagnation and periods of rapid transformation. The years where you felt stuck, where you felt you were doing nothing, were not a waste. They were a fallow period. In nature, a field must lie fallow to regain its nutrients. If you plant crops every season, you exhaust the soil. Your brain needs fallow time to integrate experiences, to process emotions, to let insights rise to the surface. You were not behind in those years. You were underground. And what grows underground cannot be seen, but that does not mean nothing is happening. The fifth and final step is to change your relationship with the future. The feeling of being behind is always a future-oriented fear. It is the fear that you will never arrive. But neuroscience shows that the brain cannot distinguish between a vividly imagined future and a real memory. When you constantly imagine a future where you are still behind, where you never catch up, you are creating neural traces of failure. You are pre-living a life that hasn't happened, and that pre-lived life feels real to your brain. It generates the same stress as if it were actually happening. So you have to interrupt the future story. When you catch yourself projecting forward into a state of failure, you gently pull yourself back. You ask yourself, what is true right now? Right now, in this moment, are you safe? Are you breathing? Is there food? Is there shelter? The answer is usually yes, and that yes is an anchor. It reminds your nervous system that the tribe did not leave you. You are still here. Now, tie this together into a single image. Imagine you are on a train, but you are not looking out the window at the landscape passing by. You are looking at the train next to yours, which is also moving. Sometimes it moves faster. Sometimes it slows down. Sometimes people get on and off. You spend the entire journey measuring your speed against that other train. You have no idea what the landscape looks like. You have no idea if you are passing mountains or oceans. You only know if you are faster or slower than them. This is the life you are living. You are missing the entire terrain of your existence because you are fixated on a parallel track that is not your own. The other train is not your competition. It is not your deadline. It is just another train, and the track you are on, it was laid specifically for you, not by fate, but by the accumulation of your choices, your wounds, your healings, your values, and your timing. Your brain does not need to know where the other trains are going. It needs to know that you are moving. It needs to feel the gentle rhythm of the tracks beneath you. It needs to see that the landscape, your landscape, is changing, even if it's changing slowly. You are not behind. You are exactly where you are, and where you are is the only place from which you can move forward. The race you think you are losing is not a race. It is a series of individual journeys happening simultaneously. Your only task is to stay on your train, to look out your own window, and to trust that the track you are on is leading you to the terrain you are meant to cross. The other trains will always be there, but they are not your scenery. You are.